Imagine being able to play your entire PC game library anywhere you want, whether you're on the couch, on a long trip, or just relaxing in bed. That's the promise of handheld gaming PCs. And right now, two names sit at very different ends of that idea: the OneXplayer ONEXFLY APEX and the Steam Deck. One is built like a no-compromise powerhouse that pushes handheld hardware to its limits, while the other is a carefully balanced system designed to be simple, affordable, and surprisingly polished. They both play PC games, but they approach portable gaming in completely different ways. So let's break it all down and figure out what really separates these two. At first glance, the OneXFLY APEX and the Steam Deck almost feel like they belong to different generations. The OneXFLY APEX is designed to impress with raw specs and premium features. It's the kind of device that makes you say, wait, this is a handheld? The Steam Deck, on the other hand, feels more like a console experience that just happens to be a PC. Valve focused on making something approachable, reliable, and easy to live with, even if it means not chasing the highest possible numbers on a spec sheet. Performance is the most obvious difference, so let's start there. The OneXplayer ONEXFLY APEX uses AMD's latest Ryzen AI Max processors, which are in a completely different league compared to the custom AMD APU inside the Steam Deck. We're talking about significantly more CPU cores, a much more powerful GPU, and far higher power limits. In real-world gaming, that means the Apex can run demanding AAA games at higher settings with higher frame rates and in some cases even at resolutions beyond what most handhelds can handle comfortably. It's closer to a compact gaming laptop than a traditional handheld console. The Steam Deck, by comparison, uses older Zen 2 CPU cores and RDNA 2 graphics. It's still capable, but it's clearly built with efficiency in mind rather than brute force. Newer games often require medium or low settings, and sometimes a bit of tweaking to maintain smooth performance. However, the Steam Deck's strength isn't raw power, it's optimization. SteamOS is built specifically for the deck's hardware, and that makes a huge difference. Many games feel smoother than you'd expect because everything is tuned to work together. You don't spend as much time fighting settings or troubleshooting. With the OneXFLY APEX, you get more power, but you're also dealing with Windows, which isn't always friendly on a small screen. You gain flexibility, but you also inherit the usual PC quirks. The display experience is another area where these two feel very different. The OneXFLY APEX features a larger 8-inch display with a higher resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate, along with variable refresh rate support. Games look sharp, smooth, and incredibly fluid, especially fast-paced shooters and action titles. It's a screen that really shows off the device's power. The Steam Deck's display is smaller and lower resolution, but that's not necessarily a downside. The OLED version of the Steam Deck in particular looks fantastic, thanks to deep blacks, vibrant colors, HDR support, and a 90Hz refresh rate. While it doesn't match the Apex in sheer resolution or refresh rate, it often feels more than good enough for handheld gaming, and it's easier on the hardware. Controls are an interesting comparison because both devices are excellent, but in different ways. The OneXFLY APEX sticks with a more traditional controller layout that feels familiar if you've used other Windows handhelds or modern consoles. Everything is where you expect it to be, and it works well for most games. The Steam Deck, though, goes a step further with its dual trackpads. These trackpads might not look exciting at first, but they add a level of flexibility that other handhelds simply don't have. They're incredibly useful for strategy games, shooters, and even navigating menus or desktop applications. When you add gyro aiming into the mix, the Steam Deck becomes surprisingly precise and adaptable. For players who enjoy tweaking controls and experimenting, the Steam Deck offers more options. Software is where the philosophical difference between these two really becomes clear. The OneXFLY APEX runs Windows, which means it's a full PC in every sense. You can install any game launcher, any mod, any application, just like you would on a desktop or laptop. That freedom is a huge advantage, especially if you play games outside of Steam or rely on specific software. The downside is that Windows isn't designed for handheld gaming. Small buttons, pop-up windows, updates, and background processes can sometimes get in the way of a smooth experience. The Steam Deck runs SteamOS, which feels more like a console operating system. It boots straight into a controller-friendly interface, sleep and resume works quickly, and everything feels cohesive. You can still install Windows if you really want full PC freedom, but most users stick with SteamOS because it's simply easier and more enjoyable to use on a handheld. Battery life is another major consideration. The OneXFly APEX includes an 85 watt-hour battery, and it also supports an additional 85 watt-hour removable battery pack, effectively doubling the capacity if you're willing to carry extra hardware. However, because the APEX can run at very high power levels, battery life can drain quickly when you're pushing performance. Long gaming sessions often mean staying plugged in or carrying extra accessories. The Steam Deck OLED uses a 50 watt-hour battery, and thanks to its efficient hardware and optimized software, it can deliver anywhere from around 3 to 12 hours of gameplay, depending on the game and settings. While it won't match the APEX in raw power, it often feels more reliable for true handheld gaming away from a charger. Price is where the gap becomes impossible to ignore. The OneXplayer ONEXFLY APEX starts at around $1,200 for the base configuration and can go all the way up to roughly $2,250 for the top-end model with 128 GB of RAM and 2 TB of storage. Accessories like the removable battery pack and external liquid cooling system cost extra. The Steam Deck, by comparison, is far more affordable. The OLED 512 GB model costs $549, while the 1 TB OLED version costs $649. That massive price difference alone will make the Steam Deck the more realistic choice for most gamers. So which one should you choose? If you want maximum power, premium hardware, and a handheld console that can genuinely replace a gaming laptop for certain use cases, the OneXplayer ONEXFLY APEX is incredibly impressive. It's not just a handheld console, it's a statement device. But if you value ease of use, strong optimization, great controls, and a more affordable price, the Steam Deck still holds its ground incredibly well. It may not win every spec comparison, but it delivers one of the most polished handheld gaming experiences available.